Hello, BookTube. I'm back with day 2 of 28 Days of SF, of science fiction. As you can see, I've cleared off shelf 2 there, and it's kind of continues on from the first shelf, a history. And there's going to be a little bit of reorganizing here while I do this, because as I pull these off, I realized, well, one should actually be on the top shelf with some others, and I'll mention that at the time. So this is very useful for me to reorganize as I'm going. And some shelves are full, and some shelves I'm trying to leave a little bit of space for new books to come in eventually. I don't have that much space, but there's ones that I definitely want to get or continue, as we'll see in this case. But let's start with this. Now, the first one here is The Cambridge Companion to Science Fiction, edited by Edward James and Farah Mendelssohn. Uh, it's the World Science Fiction Society Hugo Award winner. These Cambridge books can be hit or miss, but this one is pretty good. It's a collection, usually just a collection of essays, experts in the field writing specific topics. And this one is, well, it's a bit thin, but there's some good stuff in here. There's Brian Stableford. We'll see a little more of him in a moment. Science fiction before the genre. Let's just go through John Clute, who I really like, he'll come up again a few times. Science fiction from 1980 to present. Film and television, Mark Bould. Gary K. Wolfe. Science fiction and its editors. Gwyneth Jones. I think he's a science fiction writer as well. I'm not familiar with his fiction, if he is, but he shows up as introductions in a lot of books, of science fiction books. The science fiction, the SF Masters by SF Masterworks by Golanz. Let's see here. Catherine Kramer, hard science fiction. She has edited books with what's his name? David Hartwell. Gary Westfall, space opera, a newer science fiction historian. Can be a little academic at times, but quite interesting. Let's see here. Farah Mendelssohn, who was one of the editors here, and Edward James as well, the editors. But yeah, there we go. This is a paperback edition. This was published in 2003. And as always, even if the contents are a little shaky on the Cambridge, the bibliographies are fabulous. Here's an interesting book. We came across his name earlier. This is Under the Shadow, The Atomic Bomb and Cold War Narratives by David Seed. Now, if you remember, on yesterday's, I'm filming this on the same day though, but yesterday's you will remember the Liverpool science fiction texts series, and he was the editor. And this is quite interesting. This was given to me, and I've perused through it, and I really do want to read this, but excuse me, I want to read it in context with some stuff at the same time, Cold War sort of science fiction. And it says in Frank Paul's, or Pat Frank's, Frank Paul was an artist. Pat Frank's 1959 novel, Alas Babylon, it mentions here, and that's a fabulous sort of apocalyptic book of nuclear war. It's The Atomic Bomb and Cold War Narratives, Kent State University Press, Kent, Ohio. There's something kind of really cool in here. I'll see if I can do this correctly. There's a plane at the top of the page, and as you might see, there it is. Yeah, it doesn't work that way, but it moves along. It moves along as you go through the book, which I thought was kind of cool. But yeah, so this I look forward to dipping into with some Cold War, nuclear war type books. And here's something that's interesting. It's called Robot Ghosts and Wired Dreams, Japanese science fictions, but from origins to anime. Again, most of my knowledge of science fiction is American centered science fiction, like North America, and then British. English language. I am sort of slowly learning of other areas, especially Japanese or Asian science fiction. African science fiction is another one. But European, yeah, sort of. I'm okay there. But this kind of stuff, when this came up really cheap, I thought I'd get it. Uh, and I've read little bits, like a few of the essays. It's a collection of essays, and it's Christopher Bolton, Istvan. I don't even want to try these. The editors. It was published by University of Minnesota Press, and this is the kind of titles of the essays: Horror Machines in Pre-War Japan. Has the Empire Sunk Yet? The Pacific in Japanese Science Fiction. Alien Spaces and Alien Bodies in Japanese Women's Science Fiction. SF as Hamlet, Science Fiction and Philosophy. And it just goes on. Words of Alienation, Words of Flight, Loan Words in Science Fiction Anime. When the Machines Stop, Fantasy, Reality, and Terminal Identity in Neon Genesis, Evangelion, and Serial Experiments Lane. That's a mouthful. So that's more stuff to look into to learn more. I've read, as I said, I've read a few of the essays. This is pretty good. History of Science Fiction by Adam Roberts. This is a second edition, Palgrave Histories in Literature. It's quite a hefty one. I believe it's the same Adam Roberts who writes science fiction. I've never read anything by him. I've read some of his articles, and I've read chapters out of here. Let's see. This is second edition. It was published by Palgrave, as I say, 2016. Now, some of his stuff is a little navel gazing. That I've read, and as I say, I'm looking for the contents here. The SF in the Ancient Novel, that was actually quite good. I enjoyed that. 17th century science fiction. He goes right through like a chapter by chapter, a history of science fiction. So it is a very good one. And the bibliography, if I remember right, is pretty good. No, I was thinking of a different book because the bibliography. Oh no, there's a bibliography for each section, yes. So it's actually quite good. One here, another one. This is a general history, but it's very, very thin. This was given to me. I think somebody got it as a free copy. It's Reader's Guides to Essential Criticism, Science Fiction, Brian Baker. It's not even 200 pages. Like it's 160 pages of text. It's very, very cursory. Consultant editor Nicholas Treadle, who I assume does the Reader's Guide to Essential Criticism. This was published in 2014. I suppose it's not bad for what it is. Like the essays are pretty good because you got this is stuff about like history of the histories, science fiction writers on SF, British science fiction. So you get a very brief overview, which is not too bad. Very much the same with this one. Science fiction, history, science, vision. Sorry. Robert Scholes and Eric S. Rabkin, who show up a lot of writing around this time in the 70s. I believe this was published in 1977. Let's see here. It's a brief history of science fiction, again going through all the rehashing the same stuff. But sometimes I find these interesting because it's what they choose to pick out as the best of, or iconic, or whatever you want to call it, or representative of the time, and why those are. And that's interesting at times to read these. But there are tons of them. This one is quite an oddity. I have shown it on a book haul because it was sent to me when I was still in my old place. But it's an oddity because of who has written it, Patrick Moore. It's science and fiction. This is George G. Harrop. It's published in 1957. It is it's a history of science fiction, but it's an interesting history of science fiction, that's for sure. I've got to read it in more detail. I've read through sections of it, and some of it's okay, but his kind of conclusions and his bent is a little strange. But it will require a more closer reading than just, spending about 3 or 4 hours, reading bits and pieces of it. Here's one that's really, really good. Dated, yes, but it's one of the earliest sort of published, I'm not sure if it was a PhD or MA thesis. It's Pilgrims Through Space and Time, a history and analysis of scientific fiction. So you can tell the age of this, J.O. Bailey. Wonderful cover. Mine is the jacket's in pretty rough condition. This is the first version of Pilgrims Through Space and Time, which was a dissertation for the PhD degree, yes, at the University of North Carolina. And it's by Argus Books, published in 1947, so it is early. And I remember reading this, and I'm really, really enjoying it at the time. It's got to be 25 years ago at least. And this is the copy that I've had for a long, long time. But yeah, it's a seminal sort of historiographical history of science fiction and the scientific romance, basically. And as I was saying, that I wanted to leave space for other volumes, and that's this one here, Brian Staberford's New Atlantis: A Narrative History of Scientific Romance. This is volume 1, The Origins of Scientific Romance. Brian Staberford is a science fiction writer, a middling to good. He's done some good stuff that I remember. But he's translated a ton of French science fiction, which is really cool, proto science fiction, like this kind of material. But this is, I think, 4 or 5 volumes that I do want to get the whole set of this, because this is really good, and he's a good historian of science fiction. And he shows up, like we'll find him in other books here, along here, and things like this, as writing essays and so forth, because he's really good at doing that. This one looks interesting. I have not yet read this one, and I think it's going to be navel gazing, but I might be wrong. This is Science Fiction: A Literary History by edited by Roger Luckhurst. Oh, wait a minute. Is this the one I'm thinking of? Is it all his essays? No, it isn't. Sorry. No, there's another one I think he's done. I'm not sure if I found that one yet. But no, this one is pretty good because it's got essays in, and I've read a number of the essays. Yes, this is the one. And it sort of is a history of science fiction, but a literary history. So we've got, the beginnings, early forms of science fiction, the New Wave, 1960 to 1976. Rob Latham, that's the one. I don't know where that is. See, there's other books that are coming to mind that I don't know where they are yet. But I do have a volume by Rob Latham on science fiction. That's why I was thinking this was it. But yeah, so it's an interesting collection of essays. As I say, when they're really short or a short book, it's interesting what they pluck out as representative or the best of the time and why they think that. So I find that interesting. An author that we will see more of as well is Thomas Clarison. Thomas, well, you can't see much on this. Thomas D. Clarison. This is Some Kind of Paradise. This is Greenwood Press again. And this is an ex-library book. That's all I've been able to find, at least, cheap enough. And it is The Emergence of American Science Fiction by Thomas D. Clarison. And it was published in 1985. Now, he was an academic. He taught English and science fiction. I forget what university off the top of my head, but he started one of the, if not the first, journal of science fiction called Extrapolation. It is now published through the University of Liverpool. And this is part of the contributions to the study of science fiction and fantasy. The series editor this time was Marshall Tim, which we will see again in this eventually. And I've got a few of these. I would love to have the whole set of these, but they're prohibitively expensive, mostly out of print now. But I do like Thomas D. Clarison. He had a big interest in Clifford Simak, and he was one of the few people that did while he was alive and recorded a lot. And I had all his recordings. He had passed away, but I spoke to his wife, and she made me copies of all the recordings he had of Clifford Simak. I had them on cassette. I brought them to the UK, and I had them in my laptop case, and somebody stole my laptop. I actually didn't care about the laptop. I was gutted that I lost these tapes. Oh, I'll never replace them because they were, I believe, given to. There's an oral history collection that's been started, and so I think shortly after she gave them to me, that she wasn't able to do that again, and they all went to this place. At least they weren't the originals that were lost, but yeah, I was gutted. But anyway, Thomas D. Clarison, a historian that I really, really enjoy. Another one, well, he's passed away. A lot of these are older ones, but I really like those because they dealt with the science fiction that I really like, classic science fiction. Now, here's The Gernsback Days, a study of the evolution of modern science fiction from 1911 to 1936. Mike Ashley and Robert A. Landis. This I've got to read. This is definite on a list to read. It's Mike Ashley. We'll see Mike Ashley here, here, all over the place. We'll see Mike Ashley because he's editor. He's edited. The what are they called? The massive book or the book of whatever, it's a series of books. That's not the correct name. I can't pull it to mind at the moment. But also too, he edited the British Library science fiction series, and he edited some or most of the weird science fiction there. He's edited everything. He's written everywhere, essays, books, and a huge authority on the science fiction magazines. But yeah, this is one that I do have to read. This was published. This is a cheap reprint. See, the pages are even stuck together. Wildside Press, which is a good publisher, but this is print on demand 2004. But at least it wasn't done by Amazon Printing. So that's a definite must I need to read. And then along similar lines, or a little later, I suppose, is Astounding Wonder, Imagining Science and Science Fiction in Interwar America by John Chang. That's a great cover. That's a cover from, I think, an Amazing Stories, or a crop of Amazing Stories cover. I don't think it's Astounding, but I think it's from Amazing Stories. But it says Astounding, so it might actually be Astounding then. And this is University of Pennsylvania Press. John Chang. I know nothing about him. and I have not read this book. He says teaches Asian American Studies at Binghamton University. So this is another one that needs to be on my reading list. Now, here's one that I've got stuck in here that I want to put up at the next on the top shelf above. It's Yesterday's Tomorrow: Historical Survey of Future Societies. Remember the future wars and stuff? That I think I want to put it with W.H.G. Armitage. And this is quite good. I've read. I've not read it from cover to cover, but I've read a lot of the chapter headings. They're almost essays. Or chapters. Like we got here, the Mantic heritage, symbols and architects, extravagance to extrapolation. The debate begins from noble savage to last man, and it just goes on, and it's really, really interesting. And that's what a lot of this this collection is for me. It's not always to read the book from cover to cover. It's to dip into when I'm looking or reading somebody. But there are ones that I do want to read, like the ones that I sort of showed here from cover to cover. But a lot of it is reference material. Now that's the history end, and then we continue on the same shelf because there's space with sort of book publishing. Not always science fiction, but it's usually science fiction adjacent that they have published science fiction books. Now we've got, this definitely is Over My Shoulder, Reflections on Science on a Science Fiction Era by Lloyd Arthur Eshbach, with an introduction by Algis Budrys. Really, really cool cover there. Let's see if I can get it with, I still can't really get it without the glare. And we've got a sticker in there signed by the author. It's basically is an informal story of the science fiction book field in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Now, it's got essays about Gnome Press, Shasta Press, Fantasy Publishing, Prime Press, Grant Hadley Enterprises, August Derleth, and Arkham House, Fantasy Press story, which is different from the Fantasy Publishing company. So it's the book, and it's really cool that it gives a list of all the books that were published. Again, I've not read this from cover to cover. I've read sections of it on the specific publishers that I was interested in at the time. Now, this is something that you may remember seeing. I got this slightly before I left my old place. It's Dell paperbacks, 1942 to mid 1962. There we go. And this is a Greenwood Press again, another one of those expensive university sort of library publications. And this was published in 1983. And it's literally a listing of all the Dell paperbacks from 1942 to mid 62. Basically, the full era of the Dell publishing. And yeah, it just goes through everything. The same author. It's written by, or it's compiled by William H. Lyles. It's a catalog index, as it says. He's written a history of Dell paperbacks, which I'd love to get as a companion to this. Now, here's something that a lot of people may, in the UK especially, will be familiar with this book because I have seen it on many channels. Hence, I had to get a copy. It's called Mushroom Jungle, A History of Post-War Paperback Publishing by Steve Holland. And there were mushroom publishers like Second War, so it was like they sprang up like mushrooms. And it's a history, but just wonderful covers. Like I say, not always science fiction, but they did do science fiction as well. Let's see here. What's this? The Virgin Dancer, Blonde Rod, Road to Hell, Brandon Takes Over. Just very salacious covers. Let's see if we can find some actually science fiction. There we go. But in black and white, sadly. Some science fiction covers. But well, let me show that little quick, not as quick. let's see, there's got to be, hopefully there's a colored one of science. There we go. Oh, the Vargostatin. Some of these covers aren't the best, but they're cool. But yeah, it's a history of, and you can buy this online. It's Xeon Books, published 1993. This is still available, easily available online if anybody's interested in it. Okay, now here we go. We get the first sort of iteration of this by Philip Harbottle and Stephen Holland, the same guy who wrote the Mushroom Jungle, is Vultures of the Void. This is by Borgo Press. We'll see more about Borgo Press as well, which is an interesting press. The Dracula fans may catch the reference there. Borgo Press. This was published in, what year was this published? 1992. And it's basically Vultures of the Void, A History of British Science Fiction and Publishing, 1946 to 56. But then it was expanded to this nice big one by Philip Harbottle this time. It's about Voyagers of the Void Legacy. Yeah, it was. Yeah, this is a shorter version of this book, and this was published by Cosmos Books, which I think might be actually Philip Harbottle's imprint. But it's signed by Philip Harbottle. He has, it's been dormant for a while, but he has a YouTube channel. He's gone through his collection and the history of science fiction or book publishing, especially science fiction publishing in the UK here, which is very interesting. And that's why I got this, because there's many holes that I need to fill with regards to British book publication. And a sort of book that goes with this is an annotated bibliography and guide, the British science fiction paperbacks and magazines. Again, Borgo Press. The spine's faded. Let's see here. This was published in 1994 as well. So yeah, that's those. Now, two more, the last two. Here we go. Future and Fantastic Worlds, a bibliographic retrospective of Daw Books, 1972 to 1987. This will be interested. I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in this. It's a Starmont SF book, which is Starmont House. It's a bibliographical perspective by Sheldon Jeffrey. Starmont Reference Guide number 4. Now there's the cover. And we've got, there's a little more detail if anybody wants to pause that, if I can hold it and it's clear enough. And it's literally, yeah, just, but a very good annotated. I do love me annotations in books. The binding is quite poor, but it's just a listing of the Daw Books. And now the last one, which is Ballantine Books by David Aronowitz. It's by Bailiwick Books, published 1987. It's a bibliographical history and guide to the publisher's earlier years. It's a really tiny little book. It's signed by the author for Alistair with All My Best, which I think is still the editor from Golan's, I believe. It's a history of the guide of what is it? Betty and Ian Ballantyne, who started Ballantyne Books, and it's there's a little essay at the beginning. It's a checklist basically of their books, but it's very useful for finding out what they published during the first 10 years, and the little essay on the history is cool. So there we go. There is the end of day 2 of 28 days of SF. And as you can see, this will be the next shelf for day 3. Thank you, BookTube.